Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bowersox, let's just cut to the chase. If NASA does not receive the additional $1.6 billion for fiscal year 2020, or some anomaly in the continuing resolution to fund things, will it be able to achieve a crewed lunar landing in 2024? How important is this money?
The amendment and the ability to spend that money if we have a continuing resolution is critical to getting to the lunar surface in 2024. We need it to start our human landing system program.
So basically it blows a big hole in the program if we are not properly funding you.
Well, we wouldn't give
Makes
up,
it more complicated.
but
How
it
about
makes
that?
it much, much harder. Yes, sir.
Mr. Cook, let's go back to, again, the 20,000-foot view, as we would say in western Oklahoma. How does exploration of the moon enable us to explore Mars? Please.
The exploration of the moon does help in a lot of ways. In terms of getting to critical operations on another planetary body that we haven't done in 50 years, there are hostile environments that have to be encountered at both places that you have to learn to design for. Many of the systems that will be designed will evolve to Mars systems, if not be used as is. But in going to Mars, the trips are so much longer that reliability is
Days versus months and years.
Yes, 500 to 1,000-day missions. Everything has to be very reliable because you're sending a crew and you want to return them safely. So getting to reliable systems can be proved out in an operational program like the lunar program. You tend to spend the effort on the technology you need in an ongoing program. A lot of times programs can get defunded or the money taken to do other things. But if you're on a direct path and have clear goals, then you know that you have to get it done. So it's a forcing function too.
Mr. Bowersox, let's touch on this again. What is the earliest that Artemis 1 could be launched, and what's the limiting factor?
The earliest that we could launch Artemis 1 at this point is roughly at the end of next year. We've got to get it out of the factory, which we think will happen at the end of this year. We have, at best, 5 to 6 months for testing and another 5 to 6 months of processing at the Cape before we could launch. And then if you start throwing in weather delays, any potential technical problems, anything that we have to fix after we fire the engines, that adds on extra time, and it's just hard to say exactly what will happen until we get there.
But at this stage, you have a certain amount of time built in the concept of going at the end of 2020, correct?
Yes, sir. We've got some likely delays that are based on previous programs and previous performance, but there's lots of judgment involved in interpreting those numbers.
Mr. Cook, the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel often cites the launch rate of SLS as a concern. What's the maximum number of times SLS could launch in a year? And what would those limiting factors be when we're up and going?
My understanding that the current rate is going to be 2 a year. I don't know the limit on what they are. Ken can probably speak to that, but I am concerned about the rate because when we start going to Mars, you're going to have to go more than twice a year to get assembled the vehicles that you have. It'll take on the order of 6 or more SLS launches at full capability to send a crew to Mars. So they can't wait for however many years that is. So it's important to get the rate up.
Speaking of that, Mr. Bowersox, Henry Ford demonstrated a century ago that if you move enough product down the assembly line, cost will come down, efficiencies will increase. So after the initial development of SLS and Orion, NASA will transition to operation contracts for the procurement. What cost reductions does NASA expect to see in that next generation of contract?
Well, we're working those contracts now, so I don't really want to get into specifics, but we expect to see some reduction and some improvement in the rate with which we can produce the cores at the Michoud assembly facility.
And we'll need those savings to achieve that greater production rate. With that, I yield back, Madam Chair.